Earth's angels silently creep.
In the Chronicles of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Australia, there are few stories that match Neville Westwood, the first person to circumnavigate Australia in a motor vehicle. Now, the surprising thing was it wasn't done in a Ford Model T. It was done in a 7-horsepower, 2-seater Citroën, just like this one. Westwood made the epic journey in 1925 in order to undertake missionary work in the remote west corner of Australia. He graduated as a missionary from the Darling Rangers School, today known as Carmel Adventist College, and was accompanied by fellow student Gregory Davies.
There are many improvements in cars over the years, which is a really good thing, because this is a really rough and loud ride. But you know, in Western Australia, there are still missionaries that are taking significant journeys with God. Significant journeys with God.
Hi, I'm Julia.
And I'm Robert, and you are watching Mission 360.
Mission 360 comes to you from the Office of Adventist Mission at the Seventh-day Adventist Church World Headquarters. Every week we focus on mission stories and challenges all around us.
Today on Mission 360, we will experience not only interesting old cars, but amazing missionary stories from Australia. We won't travel the globe on this program, but from the Outback to mission and cities, we'll explore Australia from coast to coast.
My guest is Pastor Glenn Townend, who is the president of the Western Australian Conference. Glenn, thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Long way from Perth to here.
30 hours.
I'm feeling every second of it. Glenn, in the conference where you are the president, you have fostered a climate of focusing on mission and more specifically on church planting. Why is that so important?
If you look at our Adventist history here in the United States and anywhere where the Adventist message goes, it's not just seeing one or two people come to Christ, but whole groups of people, and then you have to start a whole lot of new churches. So we were a church planting movement in the past, and we wanted to recapture that today. And yeah, we're doing okay. In the last 8 years, we've started 53 new churches.
Wow.
And 46 of them are still going.
Now, I want to get this in a proper context. We're not talking about a so-called easy mission field here. We're talking about a conference where no longer can you talk about Australia being a Christian country. So you're talking to people who don't come from a Christian background, right?
That's true, yeah.
So when the pastors and lay people focus on church planting, how does that affect the spirit of the conference, of church members?
It gives them a whole lot of freedom because we say, you know, the Bible teaching, everyone is full of the Spirit who believes and follows Jesus, and they have the freedom to speak about Him and mix with their friends, neighbours, people at work, the factory, office, wherever. And if they can start a missional group, if they can see their friends come to Jesus and then their friends, well, then you have a church happening. And we've fostered that freedom, and that's what we've seen happen. It's been a real God thing.
Yeah. Now, Glenn, do you have church members or leaders who say, look, we've got so many churches here, some of them are half empty, we've got to fill those first and then we'll plant churches?
Yeah, we do have people like that.
And what do you say to them?
I say to that, well, the reason you're empty because nobody has been there for the last 20, or no one new's come for the last 20 or 30 years. And so unless that habit changes, no one else is going to come in the next little while. But thankfully, we're also seeing some of those churches rejuvenated.
Right. So it's not a question of either or, it's both. So when you motivate your pastors and lay people for church planting, what sort of results are there in terms of, how do they do it? I mean, do they rent a building and then have evangelistic programs? How do they go about the planting?
In Australia, there's a saying, there's more than one way to skin a kangaroo. And that would be the case with starting churches. We have had people rent a hall, run public programs. Very few though. Mostly it's community service that connects, or friendships, small group evangelism. And from building from that, churches develop.
You also have house churches?
Yes. And they do it the same way. Backyard blitzes and...
Hang on, what's a backyard blitz?
Going to, well, say an elderly person down the street where your house church is and just cleaning up the yard for them.
Just as simple as that?
Yeah, and young people involved in that, and then games nights at home, and just mixing, living, doing life together, and people say, hey, you guys are real, you're authentic, there is something different about you, what is it? And then you're able to have the spiritual conversation and lead them to Jesus.
Now your conference covers a vast territory, right? Tell us how big it is.
It's a third of the size of Australia.
Yeah, okay. So that's a lot of territory.
It is, and I can't...
We just visited Jigalong, which is like way out there in the Outback, but then you've got Perth and major urban centres. Tell me about one of the church plants.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you one from the Outback and then how that changed a person's life.
Yeah.
One day a pastor was told by his Indigenous congregation, if you don't leave, pastor, and go home on a dirt road 2 hours, because he had a whole huge area territory, you're going to be stuck. Let's have church early, forget the lunch, and you'll get home, because they read the weather really well, the Indigenous people.
Oh, so they saw rain coming? Or?
They sensed it.
Right.
They saw the signs. And usually the pastor agreed. But this time he said, no, I'm not going to do it. And the normal time for church to start in that church, because he did a whole district, was 4 o'clock. And all the church members had left, and it had started to cloud over by this stage. And he just sat in the church and couldn't explain why until about 4:15, the door knocked, and he went out and met an Indigenous lady, and she said, oh, where's everybody for church? And he said, well, we've had it early today because of the weather. And she said, oh, I really wanted to hear something. So the pastor said, well, come in. And only he could do it, he's a character, preached to her for an hour, and she said, that was really good. I want to know a whole lot more.
Wow.
And so this Aboriginal lady and the pastor, until 9 o'clock that evening, studied the Bible. She came back the next morning and studied until 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow.
And a little later, gave her heart to Jesus. And she is now a Bible worker in one of our Aboriginal churches in another area.
Fantastic. Wow. Glenn, I wish we had more time, but thank you so much for sharing with us today, keeping our focus on church planting.
No worries.
Viewers at home, please pray for people planting churches all around the world. It can be lonely, it can be discouraging, it can be challenging, but to know that your prayers are with them makes a big difference.
We now head to the Australian Outback, to the community of Jigalong, where Seventh-day Adventists are working with the Aboriginal people.
The Australians have a term called a walkabout. Its origins come from the time when an Aboriginal man would set out by himself walking the bush, a spiritual journey where he would hope to discover himself. A pastor in Western Australia has gone on his own walkabout, his own spiritual journey to reach the Aboriginals of the Outback.
I've been working specifically with Aboriginal people since the year 2000, but full-time since 2004. Public evangelism fits these people very well because they love pictures, and in public evangelism we use pictures to illustrate the message a lot, and also they love stories, and so I found that it fits very well. They like to have church and they feel good when they've had church, and that's one reason why we work so hard to help them to do what they really want to do.
Well, they're very spiritual people, and a lot of the kids are very spiritually receptive, and so they understand spiritual themes and concepts so easily. They have a hunger for God and they're actually asking for God, and to be able to share that and equip the locals with an ability to share for themselves, that's the main attraction for me.
I think Jigalong is getting stronger for the Lord and for the church, and now they have plans to reach out to the peoples of the Western Desert. They have discovered the commandments, the Sabbath, and they want to share it with other people. These people need to hear it as well so that they can be ready for the coming of Jesus. There's a real burden in their hearts to tell others.
Your support of Global Mission helps to establish church plants like Jigalong all over the world. Thank you for helping to tell the world about Jesus.
I hope you have been inspired by this video. Maybe you can use some of these ideas to build relationships in your community, meet people's needs. That's what Jesus did. Mission 360 will be back after a short break.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed visiting Jigalong. Australia is the 6th largest country in the world. Even though it doesn't look that big on most maps, that's because the standard projections focus attention on the northern hemisphere. Nearly 91% of Australia is undeveloped because most people live in cities along the coast. More than 80% of Australians live within 65 miles of the coast.
One of those coastal cities is Sydney. I'm sure you've seen pictures of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and that amazing opera house. This is a long way from Jigalong in every sense. Let's visit a church in the heart of Sydney that Adventist Mission supported a few years ago.
So enjoy the video and pay attention if you want to see the Sydney Harbour Bridge and Opera House. And stay tuned because after that, Gary Krause will interview a special guest, his brother Wayne, who is pastor in Australia.
The city of Sydney is very much moving into a postmodern mindset where there is a deep yearning and a deep seeking for spiritual values. The Greater Sydney Conference is essentially the city of Sydney. Has around 4 million people living in Sydney, and it's the largest city in Australia. In Sydney we have about 77 congregations spread throughout the city with an average attendance of around 6,500 people from Sabbath to Sabbath. In Greater Sydney we've got some very exciting church plants happening. Macquarie Fields is a very socially disadvantaged area, and it's a segment of the population that as a Seventh-day Adventist church we haven't done well at reaching in the past.
We've got pre-kindergarten, which is 4-year-olds, right up to, at the moment, year 11, and they're 15, 16-year-olds, and then next year we're going into year 12, so and that will complete our package at the school. When I came in 2004, it was pretty evident that the area was in dire need of Jesus Christ. We had an incident that happened at the beginning of 2005, which is called the Macquarie Fields riots. And they went around the countryside as one of the most nastiest riots that they've had. And we were only a stone's throw from those riots. I felt so impressed that we had to move now, at that time, 2005, to do something about a church. I went to our conference personnel and said we've got to do something to help the families here, and if we can help them with their spiritual needs, then the emotional and the social needs can also be then met in some way, shape or form.
Work through everyone or speak through everyone of this department today and let people.
We believe that God has placed the church here to be the hands and feet of Jesus, to proclaim the gospel, but not just to proclaim it, to actually show it to people as well, and to live it out, because we are unusual in that we have a school and a church here. So we like to call ourselves a church that's here 7 days a week. We're Adventists 7 days a week.
Predominantly it's young students from our school and their families. We have students just coming to our school, to the church, because it's the school.
We all get breakfast in the morning, and then we'd all come and sit down and we'd do like testimony and giving. And we'd all just sit there, talk about God, and we'd sing songs and pray, and it's just so awesome.
It has a real family atmosphere, and basically you're just walking off the street and you're welcomed. You don't find that at a lot of churches.
We enjoyed the music, and it was just very relaxed and laid back, but it was still focused on God and the Bible.
My passion is that our schools around the world will take this up. To me, church is seven days. We're a 7-day church. We should be operating all through the week, doing all sorts of things, and it's just been my dream coming true to see that happening on the grounds here.
Well, welcome to the program, Pastor Krause.
Thanks, Gary.
Australia is a Christian country, I guess?
Not really, no. There's a lot of people there who know nothing about God. Our Prime Minister is an atheist, and there would be people there who wouldn't even know what a Bible was. So it's actually a place where you can't take for granted that anyone has any Christian background. Spirituality, yes. Christianity, no.
I can remember attending the kids' Sabbath school in your church once, and there was a little girl there who didn't even know how Jesus had died.
That's right.
Which was quite shocking to me.
A friend of mine went into the local bank to bank a cheque for the Bible Society, and the bank teller asked him what a Bible was.
Yeah. So how does that affect the way you do ministry?
One of the key things, it takes time. You have to actually build authentic relationships with people. And from an introduction to a person accepting Christ into their lives, in my experience, it's taken me 10 years to baptize somebody in that whole process. And unfortunately, some churches aren't willing to spend that amount of time. They're wanting the quick fix, and it really doesn't work.
And if it does, we find that there's a high apostasy rate.
That's right. The reason they came in has to be because they've caught a vision of who Jesus Christ is and have a biblical worldview, and that challenges everything the way they've been living up till now.
Mm. Now, some years ago, you and a small group planted a church on the Central Coast in an urban area of New South Wales.
Yes.
What are the unique challenges of the area that you are working in?
High unemployment, a high single parent community, because mum and dad travel for work to get right in the city or just around the city. And so the children are left by themselves, high divorce rate. They're some of the challenges that we face.
Mm. So describe your congregation to me.
Congregation, it reflects the community. A lot of them, 25% of those currently attending are non-Christians and have just come because of relationships that our church people have built up. So they range from our drug addicts, our heroin addicts. We have some who have enough methadone every day that would kill you and me if we took them, to people who are doing quite well in their families. But other than that, there's a lot of single parents, people with various addictions, all in the one group. It makes for a great community.
I'm sure. Now, tell me the story of someone who's come to know Jesus through the church.
Elizabeth is a lady who I first met when I went up to the Central Coast. The high suicide rate on the Central Coast there, but she had lost a child herself, had divorced. I was in her life, and she'd say she'd come to church but never did. When she asked me to do her wedding to her second husband, she had 3 children already. He had 4 children. They then had 2 more of their own.
Wow.
And then her father had an affair with a lady out on the coast, and she had a child, and then she was murdered and had another child as well before she was killed. So there's 2 little girls, both born chemically dependent, and Elizabeth took both of them into her home.
So that's 11 kids.
11 kids. They live in 2 separate homes, about 3 doors apart, that the government pays for. They're not employed. And their lives were a mess. Their lives were falling apart, and the church was able to come in and have a relationship with them. And as a result of that, Elizabeth got baptized, and one of her daughters is baptized now, and the rest of the family is also growing. It's just an amazing thing, but it takes time to really see the power of God and a community that surrounds you and helps you out.
So how many of your church members would be involved in some sort of community service or ministry?
Outside the church, we've counted over 150 that they're involved in charities, clubs, sporting organisations, coaching, whatever it might be. And within the church, then we have more people involved in ministry than we actually have members on the church roll attending.
That's healthy.
Yes, it's really great. We believe that every person is a minister, and there's no such thing as a wooden leg in the body of Christ, and everyone is involved in ministry.
What are your goals for the future?
We'd like to continue to plant new churches, to realise that there are all different types of churches are needed to reach all different types of groups. And in cities, there are so many different people groups that one church won't fit the whole group. You've got to have many different groups, and that's what we hope to do. 6 churches so far have come out of Central Coast Community Church, and we hope a lot more will come out of there.
Now, when you do things differently, now I say differently even though you're following Christ's example of ministry, there are always critics. Have you had criticism?
Yes. We've been criticised mainly from other Christians, not the community.
Right.
The local police superintendent has offered his speedboat anytime we want to take the young people of the community out water skiing. The local member of parliament is looking for land for us to be able to do it, so the community is. And I have to say that the denominational support has been really good. They haven't agreed with everything we've done, but they have supported us. But it's the wounds of your brothers and sisters that can sometimes hurt the most.
Exactly. So why is church planting important?
Church planting, you plant churches because it's the best place for disciples to grow. And we're called to make disciples. So if I want to be involved in making disciples, I need new expressions of communities that can support them. So that's why I'm 100% behind church planting. The more churches we can plant, the more chances of disciples being able to be grown and to develop.
Yeah. So it's not a case of just focusing on trying to fill up existing churches.
No, it's harder to incorporate new people into existing churches. You've got only a certain amount of sticking points that you can make friends with people, but new churches are the best way to bring in new people.
Wayne, thanks so much for sharing with us today.
My pleasure.
I hope you've enjoyed our visit to Australia today and that you learned something new from the stories you heard.
There's so much need in our world. People are looking for hope, truth, and healing. Someone who will love them as Jesus did. We hope the ideas shared here will inspire you to see mission in a holistic, up-close, and personal approach.
So take time to be a blessing in someone's life today. We also ask you to pray for the hundreds of missionaries who have left the comfort of their home to touch people's lives for Christ.
If you want to learn more about mission work and Adventist Mission, visit AdventistMission.org. There's a whole world of information on our website. Thanks for spending your time with us. Mission 360 will be back next week.